But yeah, that's my um, background. Just in that.
That's your background. Great. Because that is what we are going to talk about next. So if you don't mind, in your introduction, you describe yourself as a reader, writer, journalist, culture critic, and communicator. Can you please tell us how you got started in like the media and communications area and give us a little bit of background, kind of like about your education journey and your career journey to where you are today?
Great. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I was born, raised in Lagos, Nigeria, which is where I'm from originally. Well, I'm not from Lagos, but I was born and raised in Lagos. Um, and I went to medical school closer to where I'm from. That's further east of the country. And it was about, say, 9 hours away from home in Lagos. In Nigerian homes where if you were a child and you grow up, you are always at the top of your class. You know,
Right. Yes.
everybody just assumes you have to be in the sciences and you have to study medicine or you have to study engineering or those kinds of courses.
Yes. You have to be a doctor, lawyer.
Exactly,
Yes.
engineer, whatever. It was
Yes.
usually those three. I mean, now it's different because there's the tech space. So there's so many things that people can be. There's also the
Yes.
internet, the content creation. But then when I was growing up, that's all my generation was. If you were graduating top of your class, you had to be this. And so I didn't have much of a
Yes.
choice, I guess. And so I was shuffled off into medical school. It's not that I hated it, but it was tough, as anyone who has been to medical school knows. And there was the year, I think it was in my fifth year, I was having difficulty passing a particular class. It was the pediatrics course, and it
Yes.
was difficult. I just couldn't get beyond it. And
Mhm.
I was repeating that year. So I had a whole year where I I couldn't join class the class ahead of me, but I had done all the stuff that you know that I needed to do in that year, except this course that I didn't pass.
Right.
So I had a whole year of just nothing, and so I went back home, and because I didn't want to stay in school, it was a boring town, small town. So I
Yes.
went back home to Lagos, and I spoke with my friend, that I would like to pursue, my writing because when I was in school, I was always writing stuff,
Hmm.
that only me could read. And, I was like, I would like to pursue this, see if, there's something there. And so he was like, oh, yeah, I know someone that knows someone. And he linked me up with a publisher of a magazine and a website.
Right.
It was
Yes.
like a cultural platform, an online newspaper. And so, but they also had a magazine, physical magazine, a quarterly magazine that they published inside. And
Yes.
so I sent my stuff to the editor slash publisher, and he was like, "Oh, there's something here. It's really good. And if you want to intern with us, I could teach you, a lot of things, and how to get better at writing." And I was like, "Sure, I have this whole year that you know." And so I joined the newsroom, and I
Hmm.
was working as an intern every day, and I enjoyed it, and that's how my writing slash journalist career began.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I
Yes.
had to go back to school after the year, but I was also writing, from remotely for them, and
Yes. Awesome. So let's recap. So you started out in medical school,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
um, on the medical path, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was it going the best way? I have a similar story. I started out as a pre-med major.
Oh, okay.
When I went to college, I had a class that I could not quite get out of, and I started to rethink what my area was, and I ended up in communications. And so you have a similar kind of story. You were a strong writer. and someone discovered your writing and you ended up being introduced to this opportunity that put you in a newsroom. So you probably never thought that that was going to be something that happened. So what were you thinking when you first like started being an intern working in the newsroom? Like, was it what you thought it was, or were you surprised about how media worked?
I was surprised because I didn't have any idea what it was like or what it
Right.
would be like. So I
And
was
I
like,
think most people don't have an idea. That's why
Yeah.
we're here today.
yes, so it was like a whole new journey for me. It was away from, I was just happy to be away from the drudgery of, if you know medical school, it can get, like boring and you're reading and, just constantly. Uh, so I was just happy to be away from that for a while.
Right. A
And
different pace.
yes, and I happened
Not
to,
saving lives every day, right?
saving lives maybe, but in some other way.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
you can call it that. It was a youth-facing media organization, and so that was of interest to me because that's what I enjoyed it, and so I was happy to be to just jump in and learn
Right.
as much as I
Do you remember what your first story was
can.
when you were at that publication?
No, I don't. That's a long time ago.
That's a
I
long time ago.
no, I don't. But I also know that I showed an interest in writing about film and Nollywood, and at that point, so I remember my editor kept pushing me towards that line. It was like, you seem to enjoy this film writing, so you know maybe you should do more of that. So I started doing that also early, while I was doing all this.
Yes. And what made you have interest in like film, entertainment, like that kind of area? You were just strong in that area, or do you have like a passion for it?
Yeah, I guess we grew up in my household. We grew up watching lots of films from Hollywood, from also Bollywood. That's from India. Before even we started watching Nigerian films, or before Nollywood took off. So my dad was a huge. I remember when he bought the video player. The very first film he bought with the video was Coming to America. Um,
Wow.
yes, those are the kinds of films that we grew up watching. Sound of Music, Mary
Yes.
Poppins, that whole. And so we were exposed to, and we had cable. My dad was
Hmm.
a big, CNN kind of news buff.
Yes.
So we were exposed to all of that world.
Right.
So film was very much a part of my growing up. But also, because he was a civil servant, he used to read magazines a lot, Time magazine, Newsweek magazine. And
Hmm.
when he came home with the magazines, I was always going to the entertainment pages of those magazines, because
Hmm.
there was just something bright and cheery
Right.
about them in the ways that,
Exciting
yes,
pictures. Yes.
yes, in the ways that the business or the politics parts were not really that exciting to me. And
Yes.
so I would, flip towards those pages and read about, Hollywood. It was like a world where, you know, but I was invested in that world, Hollywood movies, Hollywood films, and all that. And so I guess I must have read hundreds of film reviews,
Wow.
on pages of this magazine. This was before the internet.
Wow. So hundreds of reviews.
Yes,
Yeah.
because you would get this magazine weekly,
Hmm.
and so every
Hmm.
week there was a film review published, or music review.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I remember those. Do you remember
Yes,
those, Pastor Johnson, when they would be in
Yeah.
the newspapers and you could read about like the review of the new movies that came out? This is, before they would be on the internet or anything
hmm,
Oh
like
yeah.
that. I certainly do
Yes.
remember those. So that was something that you did. That was
yes, not to age myself or anybody, but
Right, not to age ourselves.
Right.
Do you remember those, Pastor Johnson,
Yeah, I do
when
remember
you could
those.
read in the newspaper?
Yeah, it's a little different now though, isn't it? Is technology has brought us a long way.
It
I was curious to
has.
ask, how was your family taking these new moves that you were making from medical school now into journalism? How was your? I know you mentioned your father and your family. Was that a big change for them?
um, they I don't think they were surprised about it because I was a big reader when we were growing up, and they encouraged it. I, my sister, there was always books around the house. My mom is a teacher. She was a teacher. She retired. She's retired now. There was always shelves and shelves of books, all kinds of books, children's books, adult books. So they knew from that reading was something that I was, you know, into. And so when I started writing, I don't think anybody was surprised. Just as long as I made sure that I graduated medical school, that was what was important to them. So they're like, yeah, fine, as long as it's not interrupting your studies. And they knew that I was
Right.
going to graduate anyway. So it wasn't really, I didn't get any pushback. Maybe the pushback
Yeah.
is now,
Mhm.
is going to happen now because I recently moved to the States and they expect that I would, you know, go back to practicing medicine or,
Mhm.
Mm.
find my way into the, into the American, um, medical
Right.
system. But I don't know. I'm not quite convinced that's what I want.
Yes. We'll
So
check
maybe
back with you in a
yes,
few months and see what
yes.
happens.
So yes, so,
Right. Did you ever consider being like a medical writer, like kind of merging the two since you kind of had the background in the medical? You did like the writing. I know that you liked like the entertainment. But did you ever consider like writing for medical journals or anything like that? And if you didn't want to do that, then why not?
when I was back home, when I was in um, Nigeria, not so much. But now, because it wasn't really a thing that um, I knew that I didn't know that it was a thing. You know,
Yes.
I didn't know there were
Medical
opportunities
writing.
there. Yes. Um,
Yes. I
but
find
but
that a lot of people don't know about journals. We think of like magazines, but we don't think about industry journals, medical journals, dental journals. They're so huge. I used to work for a medical publishing company, and I was just floored about how many different scientific and medical journals that there are out there that, people in different industries can be featured in or even write for. So we forget about like the journals. And so, something that was on your radar didn't because you didn't know about it.
yes, but
Mm,
since I came to the US, because I've been, you know, just weighing my options and trying to see what's out there. So I also discovered that that's a thing, and so
yes.
I'm also considering, doing that. So it's interesting that you asked because it's something that I think that you're not, it marries those two worlds and it feels like the fit for what I could be doing.
Right.
So yeah,
Yes. And so
something I'm thinking.
what a lot of people don't know about journalists is that, a lot of you are freelance journalists. And so you can write for many different publications in different kind of areas and industries and actually, kind of earn money from doing that. So can you tell us a little bit like about how journalists, find stories to write or media outlets to work for and like how the pay structure kind of works?
That's a difficult one. that it's difficult because um, I come from a background where it was more like a tech-ish company. So it was an
Mhm.
internet company. So it was a media company, but it was the media technology company. That's where I
Mhm.
started working with. I didn't really start working in the traditional newspaper, newsrooms, where they did stuff. They had ways of doing stuff, you know. So, so for me, it was different because while I was on staff, they also expected me. They weren't expecting. They also knew that I could freelance because let's face it, the pay wasn't great, you know, and so they would not mind if you were freelancing
Mm-hmm.
somewhere else, and that could supplement your income.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I started freelancing, but in Nigeria, there's not many opportunities where you can freelance and get paid for the work as a journalist or you know, as a reporter or as an
Right.
editor, you know. So you have to look outside the country. And
For
so,
other ways to earn money
yes,
surrounding what you're doing.
yes. And so that's what I had to do when I decided I didn't just jump into it because I felt like I needed some time to build my skills, but also my
Yes.
confidence, because
Yes.
a lot of
Yes.
freelancing is pitching,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
especially when you first start, nobody knows who the hell you are. You are just
Right.
blindly reaching out to editors and people like, oh, can I write about this? I have this idea.
Yes.
So that in itself needs some level of confidence that you have. And so it took me a while
Yes.
to build
You know
that.
what? And I'm sorry. That made something go off in my head. I'm thinking, as a publicist, I do the pitching and I encourage my entrepreneurs to pitch to the media, but it never crossed my mind that you guys have to pitch also. Did you think about that, Pastor Johnson, that they have to pitch their stories to get picked up?
Yeah,
That never crossed my mind.
what was interesting to me is I'm curious to know what makes a good story for you. Like, if you had five stories that you were following, what makes you pick one or two? What are the things you're looking for?
It depends on a lot of things. It really depends. There are some stories that I'm naturally drawn to, um, because these are stories that I personally invested in. So I would, you know, like to pick those kinds of stories in the lineup.
Mhm,
But I also have to think about what chances these stories have of being picked up.
mhm.
So let's say I like writing about rice, for instance,
Yeah.
and I know that the contacts I have are with, say, the New York Times, and the New York Times is not really interested in writing about rice or in publishing about rice. Rice, even though I love writing about rice, but I also want to get paid, and I also want to see my story, out there and read by people. I will either have to move the rice story to the back burner, you know,
Mm,
pending when I can find someone that is willing to pay for that story, or I can decide to find an angle that will interest the New York Times. You know, find
Yes.
how rice can be linked to the trade wars in, America or whatever, or COVID,
ah,
or
Yes.
something. Just find a way to. It's also that topic, but maybe not in the way that I want initially envisioned it, but a way that it appeals to the editor and aligns with what they're interested in covering. And even at that,
wow.
when the editor is interested, the editor also comes with their own, you know, opinions and their own angles. They're like, that's interesting. But why don't you tell it like this? Because they know what their audiences want and what the audience. The whole point is for your story to reach as wide an audience as possible.
Right.
And so even by the time you talk with the editor, it's also shifting. The story, sometimes what you end up pitching is not the story you end up telling, but it's
Mhm.
also rights. It's related to rights. So it's to answer your question, it would depend on so many factors.
Gotcha.
Sometimes I have editors who I'm in good terms with. Um, I will pitch two stories that I know that they're interested in covering. And when I feel like we're in a good place, I throw in the third one. And because they already trust me to an extent, and
Mm-hmm.
they are more willing to look, have a second look at something, even
Right.
when it's not what they would be interested in
Right. Because you've
initially.
built a relationship and they now trust you.
Yeah.
Yes, so they're like,
Mm-hmm.
if he's coming to us with this, then maybe there's something there, and let's see what as opposed to reaching out blindly to them. If it's
Mm-hmm.
not something they are initially interested in, they're like, no, sorry,
Yes.
we're not. So
Yes.
constantly negotiating and shifting. So sometimes you have the stories on top, sometimes you have to put it back, and bring another one, and it's finding that balance.
Mm.
I don't
Right.
know.
So I understand that you choose your stories. Do people ever pitch stories to you?
Yes, funny
Yeah.
you should say that as this, because the story that you read, I don't know if it's my first story that you read, the one about the Real Housewives um, of Lagos,
Yes.
and
Yes. I do want to talk about that.
yes, so funny. It was I had in my mind to write about the show, but I hadn't, really outlined how it was going to look like. And then
Right.
one day, a publicist for the show in Nigeria reached out to me and was like, "Oh, we have, this show we're launching, and would it interest you if you would like to interview the head of content for the organization, for the media company?"
Right. And this is for the Netflix show Young, Famous, and African that we're talking about.
No,
Just so our
the other show, the Real Housewives of
oh,
Lagos.
the Real Housewives of Johannesburg,
Lagos.
of Lagos. There's a
Yes.
Lagos.
Yes. There's
Oh,
a
I love
Lagos.
all the housewives. So I didn't know that there was a Johannesburg one, and then I found it and I watched it, and it was so good. And it was right after that I had watched Young, Famous, and African, and then I realized when it got done, I was so sad. I was like, "This is so good. When is there another season?" And there was already a season two. Oh, I'm super excited about that. I want to talk to you more about that on another time. But yes, so that is the one that we're talking about. Okay, all right,
Yeah,
I'm
so it's
back.
the
There's
same.
so many good shows now
Yeah.
that.
So it's the same company that does that licenses the Johannesburg one, that also licensed the Lagos franchise, or the Lagos episode. And so the publicist reached out and was like, we we could have you interview the head of content of Showmax. Showmax is the company who is doing this show. I'm like, sure, why not? And so, when I talked to her, the idea started to form in my head, about what kind of story I wanted to tell. Not just with this show, but also with the Netflix reality show, which was similar, in
Yes.
themes. And so I was like, maybe if I combine these two, if an editor is not interested in one, when you put two of them, there's a trend. You see where there's stories about young, rich, famous, showing another side of Africa. That
Yes.
might be an angle that the editor is interested in. And so it started to coalesce in my head, and that was the pitch that I sent out to the editor, and she loved it immediately. She was like, "Great, let's do it. Why not?"
Right. Because
And
everyone
so,
was already talking about it. It was something, it was a trending topic, and then what we call it kind of news jacking, something that's already kind of going on, and you jump on it and, it
great,
gets traction because it was something that was already really popular. And I will
great.
say that that was something that made me want to invite you is that when I were looking at your different articles and like Okay Africa and all the different places that you write, I saw a trend that you wrote about these shows and I was like, oh, I love these shows. He would be a great guest. Everybody's talking about these shows right now, so let me hop right on this as well. So a publicist pitched that to you, so that's awesome. Do you work with a
Yeah,
lot of publicists? Do a lot of publicists pitch you, or is it sometimes just like entrepreneurs, or a little both?
a little of both. Mostly, because the entertainment industry is not as structured we have back home. It's not as structured as what is obtainable here in America or Hollywood. So there's a lot of people who don't really know that you should get publicity, or maybe they know, but they just can't
Mm-hmm.
afford to get publicity. But for those ones that have, structures, I would assume that if I was a good publicist, I would know all the journalists who publish stuff related to my work or who publish stuff on my feed. You know, that's like the first thing I should know. I should have like an address book, of everybody. And so I would assume that some publicists have me on their contact
Mm-hmm.
card. And so some of
Yes.
them reach out to me, from time to time. I can't publish everything. I can't write about every idea that I get. But I appreciate it because when they reach out to you, they make your job easier. So you don't have to start chasing someone for an interview. Chances are
Yes.
their clients are in that period where they want to talk. Maybe they are marketing something, or they are selling something, or they are doing a publicity cycle. So there's also already that willingness to talk to journalists,
Yes.
as
Yes.
opposed to me just chasing them blindly, and, sort of groveling like, oh, give me this, give me that, So it's a good relationship to have. And sometimes the entrepreneurs themselves reach out, filmmakers reach out to me, business
Right.
people reach out to me.
Yes.
But I find it's always more professional, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
when there's a publicist involved.
Nice.
When you have
Which also
those,
So
has its downsides. Also, sometimes it's best to go directly to the
to the
to the
to the
business person.
source.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
now are those entrepreneurs? Are they? Is that a source of income for you? So if an entrepreneur came to you and said, "Hey, I have a story for you to follow," are they paying you to follow that story and try to pitch that story?
Not necessarily, because if they're paying you, I think you have to note it down, or you have to disclosure. Yes, you have to
Ah,
disclose that I'm being this so person. It's not that they're paying you. I personally wouldn't take money from without disclosing. But I guess the best thing is to find an angle that works, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and where it's not just, oh, we're doing this story just because this person asked me
Right. Yes. Because when you pay for that, we call that what? Advertising.
to.
So there are
Exactly.
lots of different people who will hit me up on Instagram, not knowing that I'm a publicist, and they'll offer to, for $99, they can guarantee that I'll be featured here, 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 there, and everywhere. And I tell those people ask me all the time, like, should I do this? And I'm like, no, you should, like, for legitimate, like, stories, article, earned media, you do not pay for that. Like, it is not something that you do. You shouldn't be paying to be on a guest on a podcast. And some people do that, and it's okay, but that is called advertising.
Yeah.
And you have to be upfront about that. And so that's a thing, when you're pitching journalists, you can't be offering them money to do things. There's even a fine line when it comes to like gifts, giving gifts to media. Do you mind talking about that a little bit? Like sometimes if someone may want to send you flowers or some kind of food or a gift card to thank you for an article that you may have written or something that you did. What are the rules around giving gifts to media?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It raises a lot of ethical, issues that I might not necessarily have the answers.
Yeah, and that is a little gray
Yeah,
also, because I've
yeah.
been in this profession for a long time, and I'm still like, I don't know, like,
Mm-hmm.
what the exact rules are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's people who say, "Oh, I love the article you wrote about me. Can I have your account number so I send some money?" I'm like, "No, no, no, don't worry about that. I was paid for the article already, so I don't need you to." Because then someone sends you money, they might think that you're now in their pocket. As a journalist,
Yes.
you tomorrow you might have to write stories that put that person not necessarily in a great light. and because they've given you
They
some
paid
money,
you.
sometimes they expect there's some kind of expectation that they have of you, and so maybe they expect you to kill stories, not pursue stories, or
Yes.
they come to you with maybe they have a competitor and they want you to crash,
Hmm.
do an actual
Yes.
crashing there. You know, you don't want to be as a journalist, you don't want to be in somebody's pocket or business person's pocket. And sometimes
Yes.
it's hard because even in the US here, journalism is hard. It's a hard profession. It's not exactly the most rewarding in terms of monetary
Yes.
value. Newsroom that's shrinking every day. They're
Yes.
laying off journalists. And so sometimes it's hard, when you see some business person who seems to have something that you need or that you want. But if
Hmm.
you have that knowledge and that sense of fairness and
Hmm.
what is right and what is wrong and understanding the tenets of your profession,
Hmm.
you should know that there's certain lines that you don't cross. If someone sends you flowers, I mean, I don't see the big deal. Some
Hmm.
people would not, and also some newsrooms have their rules and regulations,
Yes.
what they
Yes.
expect their
Yes.
staff to do.
Yeah.
But for
Yes.
freelancers, you know, nobody's telling you what to
Yes.
do and what not to do. So
Right.
you
And
have
that's
to
a big difference in between working with a freelance journalist, because you guys are more, kind of like entrepreneurs,
Mhm,
contractors. You can kind of
mhm.
do other things. And then other people who work for like maybe CNN, they can't do exactly what they want to. Some people wanted to be a guest on the podcast, but they could not because they would have to get it cleared. So definitely a big difference. I find that working with freelance journalists is there that you guys are a lot more accessible and kind of
Yeah.
able to relate with. So how long do you think that it takes, like by the time you get a story, research it, sit down, write it, publishing, from idea to story being out, how long do you think that process is?
It depends. There's really no set rules to it. Sometimes your deadline determines how long the process is. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes if you're working in a newsroom, for instance, you have to deliver by the week, for instance, or by the month. You have to, whatever you are researching and writing, you know that at this time of the month, my story should be ready. So that sort of determines how long you can spend. Of course, there are some stories that take longer than others. And
Right.
you
Do they
have
take
to,
hours, days, or weeks? Like, give us some kind of idea, like how long it could take, or on average,
sometimes
how long?
I would say weeks,
Weeks.
you know,
Okay.
maybe the most basic story I would say for me, especially if it's in a beat that I'm familiar with already, where I have the sources, I can reach the sources easily because
Yes.
they know me, have established a relationship with
Mm-hmm.
them. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I, have usually have the bulk of
Mm-hmm.
what I need. And
Nice.
sometimes the editing process takes longer, so with different organizations, different groups, sometimes your article goes through cycles of editing. Some media organizations will have you to go through a copy editor, will have you go through the line editing, the main editor, and
Mhm.
that's like different cycles. While some just have you do it once, and if they need you to do something, you go back and so you can't really put a time. Most of the time, it depends on the publisher's um, timetables and timelines and when they want the story. So even at the moment, pitch them, you tell them, "Oh, I can have it in a month," and they're like, "Oh, that's
Mhm.
fine, but we're going to need it in 2 weeks. Can you do that?" If you think you can do that, you're like, "Great." Or you tell them, "That's not going to work because I need to get this and get that." But
Right.
also, you can't everything. That's you at the level at the time you are pitching. When you go into the
Mhm.
field to report the story, you're really not in control of a lot of things.
Yes.
So your
Yes.
source might not just be available to talk to you. You
Mhm.
can't force that. You know, your source might just not see value in talking to you at that point. You have to
Right.
convince them. do a lot of pushing, and so it's with each story, it's different. The longest I've spent working with story, I think, was about 4 months on
Wow.
a particular story, and
Yes.
it was great because the editor was working with was like, yeah, that's fine. We don't. This can wait. We
Hmm.
understand. Because I was speaking with some media executives. It was they had to. They were the ones. They were domiciled in Africa, but they also needed to get um, okayed by the team in the US. So it was a lot of, and then there was PR people involved as well.
Hmm.
So that took a long time to report. But there are some stories also that cannot wait for all of this
Right. That are
to
the
happen.
timely stories because
Yes,
things are
they're time,
happening right
and they
then.
need to go at a certain period. Then, so
Yes.
maybe all you need to do is just say, "Oh, I reached out to this person, and there was no response," and then keep
Yes.
it moving.
Mm.
Awesome. So, tell us right now, which publications do you currently write for? Because this is the thing with journalists, the media profession, you guys change a lot. People move around to a lot of different publications. They'll add a publications, not writing for publications. So that is totally a thing, keeping up with journalists. So, which publications are you writing for currently?
Yeah. So I'm freelance right now, but uh, so I would usually write for whoever agrees to publish my work. But having said
Understand.
that, I find myself working. I've established some relationships with some particular editors in some organizations, and so I find myself going back to them, more than others. So, OK Africa,
Yes. Big one. Huge.
the Africa Report magazine is
Yes.
another one. The Continent is online magazine that is shared on WhatsApp. It's like an innovative format, for sharing on WhatsApp. The Continent is great. Um, who else? I think those are the three most regular. Um, Film Krantz, it's a Dutch publication, Dutch film publication. Mostly I cover film festivals for them.
Nice.
Um, yeah, Al
Yeah.
Jazeera, I've written for Al Jazeera, The
Yeah, Al
Verge,
Jazeera. Nice. So many
so
different
many,
places.
so many
Yes.
variety,
Do,
wherever.
you write?
Variety,
Do you
another
publish your
huge
own
one.
work? Like, do you publish your own?
Um, every time someone asks me that, I wish I could. I tried opening a Substack. For some reason, I couldn't follow through with that. But that's something I intend to, a lot of ideas that I have that fall by the wayside just because I couldn't find publications willing to take them.
Mm.
And I still, they're still in me and I want to let them out. And I find that the best way might just be me doing it on my own
Yep.
platform.
Mm,
And so, yes,
hmm.
I'm constantly thinking of how to get my stuff like up and running, but not yet.
Nice. Sounds like you could have a blog. You could do a blog and you can make it a paid blog,
Most definitely.
monetize it. I'm all about the monetizing messages. Whenever time we're writing or telling stories, it takes a lot of effort to do that. And so, listen, you to pay us for the information, the knowledge, the words. So you
It
could
does,
totally
and
pay gate that.
that's one of the reasons I haven't pursued it actively because I know that monetizing it is going to involve a lot of effort and a lot of work, and so a lot of delayed gratification at the beginning.
Yes.
And so I'm like, am I ready for this now? Are my finances where I need them to be, or I need to, but
Hmm.
it's a work in
Yeah.
progress.
It's the work in progress. So we'll stay tuned and make sure that we subscribe to
Most
support
definitely.
you. And so I want to go back because we're going to be wrapping up soon. And we talked about sources. And when I get to talking to people about media, like I know the terms, they know the terms, but sometimes I forget to like make sure that we explain the term. So a media source is, like a person who assists a journalist with a story. They might give them a quote. They might be an expert in an area that can kind of give some more insight into an area. How do you define a media source? And how do you stay in contact? Like if somebody wanted to be a media source for you, how would they go about doing that?
Hmm. There's different ways, but I would say the best sources are people, because sources are human beings. You know,
Yes.
sometimes they're not. This is the age of technology. Sometimes they're not, but most of the time they are. And you need to cultivate relationships with
Yes.
people. So people think that a journalist's work is just to sit down and dig and research in front of your computer, in front of your laptop. Yes, there's a lot of it, but also you need
Yes.
to go out to the streets and report and speak with the people who are involved by the stories that who are involved in the stories that you're telling, because every story has a human element. It affects human beings. You know, it's not just
Absolutely.
data. We make a lot of talk about data, but you know what? Data is drawn from people, and so you have to have those people, on hand. So, like you mentioned, the source could be a CEO of a media organization, of a business organization. It could be as it could be a janitor who works in the organization. It could be a
Mhm.
woman who sells food in the marketplace. It could be the president, of the United States, or the presidency of, you know,
Yes.
of any country at a certain point. The key is to cultivate relationships, speak to them, make them understand that you're not just there to extract the story and go. You're not just profiting off them. Sometimes that's what the relationship
Mm.
essentially is, but
Right.
it
Yes.
can be more than that. So even after you now with social media, also it's easier, or there's a lot more avenues for developing source. So
Right.
I might be following you on social media.
Hmm.
I read what you put out. Sometimes I comment,
Right.
sometimes I retweet. We
So you
kind of,
find sources on social media.
yes.
And how do you find them? Do you look at hashtags? Do you search certain terms? Like, how do you find media sources on social media?
It all depends. Sometimes hashtags, like you mentioned, sometimes you put out a call. Oh, I'm a journalist, I'm working on this. If you know anybody because my network of followers, I have a lot of journalists also following me. I have a lot of
Yes.
activists
Yes.
following me. I have a lot of
Mhm.
people who work in the fields that I would typically cover, that I follow, and they're following me. And so I put out, oh, if you know someone who works with so, can they get in touch with me? Sometimes that, and someone sends you a DM, oh, I know this person, or you should talk to this person. Sometimes someone responds, you should talk
Yes.
to this person. And I've found a lot of sources like that. Sometimes I
Yes.
would just Google, and it's funny what you can get on simple hashtags
Right. So hashtag search or Google search.
or
So
Google
when
search.
entrepreneurs would like to establish themselves as an expert in an area, then they need to be, on top of their social media, demonstrating who they are, what they do. They need to be easily found on Google. So we need to get those SEO rankings up, because when you search a term, you get those first 10 pages on Google. Honestly, when you're looking for a source, how many pages do you look?
It depends till I find what I want, I guess. So I'm prepared to look at as many pages as I want, but usually within the first, one, two, you usually have something come to the
Yeah.
fore. From that information that you get, you can dig deeper to get even more.
Hmm.
So it's usually best
Right.
if your SEO or your search, whatever,
Right.
calls
Had
out.
you ranking higher.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's great. That's because nobody wants to
Yeah, be on page 8 of Google where you're getting
yes,
all the
for
strange
basic.
things.
Yeah.
Yes, that's awesome. And that brings me like to another question is that when you are looking at a source for a story, and so you're checking them out, say it's me, you're checking me out. All right, you're going to my website, you're going to my social media. What things are you looking for to make you decide, like, okay, I trust her to use her as a source? What are you looking for?
It depends. Sometimes I want to be sure that you are an expert in whatever that I'm researching or writing about. It's usually best if you can get experts, people who actually know their stuff.
Yes.
So I want to know that you actually have a grasp of, because I'm also being educated. So I don't want
Yes.
to be the blind person being led by the blind, you
Yes.
know, and
Yes.
then my viewers, my audience who is also blind but expects me to have done my work in
Right.
presenting them with the information. You know, and you don't have to be the president or you don't have to have a PhD, in
Right.
whatever it is, but you should have some relationship to the subject or to the
Hmm.
my story.
Mm.
Yes. So
Sometimes
definitely a website with information about you.
A book.
yes,
What other do you look for things like if they won awards or
Yeah.
uh, if they've had media? What about media? Do you look at like the press pages of people to see if they've done media before? And if so, does that make you be like, ah, this person knows what they're doing? They're great. Or do you say, this person already does a lot of media. Maybe I'll find someone else. Like, how do you feel about that when you see a
mm,
press page?
yeah, that's great. I always go to the press pages, but I also want to ensure that I'm sifting out the fluff from what I actually need. So sometimes some press pages can be, full of flowery stuff that doesn't mean
Hmm.
anything really. And you find out that at the end of the day, you are just doing more PR for this person,
Mm.
Right.
and
Yes.
they're not even giving you what exactly you want or what exactly you should be getting. So you have
Right.
to be discerning enough to know, for this particular story, do I really need to hear from this person who has 50 covers? Sometimes it's great, if you've won an award, you want to say, oh, this person who won the Pulitzer is my source. That credibility, it gives your reporting
Right.
credibility, or this person who has a PhD in this field. Sometimes it's great, but if this person who has a PhD in this field has been quoted in 10 other articles similar to yours, or maybe you want to look at a fresh angle, maybe you want to diversify your sourcing. I know I worked with an editor one time. I was doing this story about female comedians in
Hmm.
Nigeria, two of them, and I spoke with both comedians, but I also, for my other sources, two other people I spoke with were men. And it was
Hmm.
just, I didn't think about it. It was like my easy. They were people I knew who were related to this
It's time
story,
for
who
lunch.
worked in comedy or
This
who
routine will
worked in
end.
entertainment. And so the editor said, I mean, it's great. She said it's great, but the angle of the story is about these two women who are breaking boundaries of comedy in the traditional female industry. Could
Hmm.
you not
Yes.
find people who are women who could speak to what they're doing? And I was like, that's when it occurred to
Right.
me that, my bad. I really should have been more intentional. So
Yes.
sometimes you have to be more intentional in diversifying your sources.
Right. It puts your reputation on the line as well, even as a publicist. I've been in situations where my reputation is on the line with, someone that I have referred or, presented. So, I tell like people that I work with that you really need to demonstrate your expertise, and not just like on your business page and on your website, but even on like your personal pages, because what you don't want to be is the person that brings like the wild card person to the news station for an interview and they say something kind of off kilter. So we definitely want to be putting our expert faces forward, if
Mm-hmm.
this is if you want to be known as a source to the media. So let me ask you this is a little bit more fun. If you yourself could be featured somewhere in the media, where would you choose to be featured? Like, it could be a TV show or a magazine cover or anywhere. Where would you want to see your face?
I don't know. That's funny. You know, people who write about people, we find it hard to see ourselves, in the
I'm like
front.
that as a publicist. I
you
don't
know,
want
you
to
know,
be
you
I
know
don't want
what?
to talk.
Publicists are always behind. You see them, and they're like,
Always.
you know, guiding their talents. This is,
Yes.
so it's a bit like that for journalists as well. Of course, the media landscape has changed a lot, and you know, sometimes you have to be out there.
Yeah.
Maybe on this list that was published recently, the Time 100.
Mm.
Oh, that's a nice one. That's a good one.
Did you say?
I'm
Yeah.
still
So
100.
yeah. So maybe that, I don't know for what exactly, but it'd be nice to have someone write
Times
something,
100.
write
Nice.
something about me and say, oh, he's a great whatever.
Right. And where would we see the greatness coach? Where would you like your face or your name in the headlines? Where could you see
Oh man,
yourself?
I'm like him. I really haven't taken much thought. I've always just wanted to showcase what it is I'm doing and the impact that I'm making. So I haven't really taken much thought to the actual headline, so to speak. I just wanted to get the word out
Right.
about how we're impacting the world.
Right. We need to be thinking about those. I encourage people to think of like a headline. What would you want your headline to be on your ultimate article? And that's something that we kind of, keep in our minds and that we work towards. So I'm going to need you guys to be coming up with your headlines. I don't know mine yet. That's a tall order to ask when you really think about it. Be like, man,
Yeah.
what would my headline be?
Yeah, because
And
we
my,
spend so much time crafting other people's stories and their
Mm.
headlines, and we don't give a thought to ours, because we think, what would anybody possibly find interesting about us or whatever. But it's something, now that you mentioned,
Mhm.
something I will
Yes.
be thinking.
Be thinking about. So tell us, is there anything that you're working on right now, that we can help with, that our listeners can help you with? Do you need any sources for anything? What can we do to help you do your job?
Hmm. Hmm. That's like
It's
a
another loaded question.
blank check.
How can we support you? Can do you make money with shares? Can we be sharing your stories? Like, what can we do to support our
Hmm.
media professionals?
Well, that's a good one. Sharing. I don't personally don't make money from shares, but the more people that can see your stories, the
Mm-hmm.
better. I this same article about reality TV shows. I didn't research how popular it was going to get, but there's a lot of people every day. Someone reaches out to me. Oh, let's talk about your story. Can we talk about this story? I'm like, oh, you guys really love Real Housewives and you know
Yes.
young, famous, and rich people. You guys really, really
Oh,
love
yes,
stuff like
because
that.
I'm going to ask you. I plan on asking you to do an IG live with me so
Oh,
we can really get in. We're
sure,
not
of
going to do
course,
that here because
of
this is the
course,
education, this is for the learning, but we're going to get to it.
of course. Why
So,
not? But
yes,
that's,
I would love to have a fun talk with you on IG live, once after we're done with this.
yeah.
Um,
But it's been shared a lot, and I was surprised. So the people reach out to you from all kinds of places. So I guess
yes.
so. I guess with that, the more people that can engage with the world, that's what you want. So,
Nice.
That's
Well,
awesome.
thank you so much. And so, do you have any other questions, Pastor Johnson, that you want to ask?
Well, from my perspective, from the entrepreneurial side of it, as I'm listening to the whole conversation and I'm thinking, like if you had to give guys like myself and other entrepreneurs any piece of advice on, here's the top couple of things you may need to do to make yourself and your stories look appealing to guys like me, what would those things be?
For me,
Yeah, for if
Or
you
in
had to give
general,
advice
like
to
as a
us. Yeah.
journalist in general.
mm, I guess I would say invest in a good publicist,
Mm,
who knows what they're doing, who knows the game, who knows the industry. Um, and it's not just PR for the sake of PR, who know how to tell your stories.
mm,
Because you're a business person, you're building a business. You don't have some business people naturally are great PR, are great publicists of themselves, in themselves. But most of the time you need help,
mm,
even with things like media training, even with things like, well, and it's funny because for journalists, you don't necessarily want an executive or an entrepreneur who is so polished to the extent that they don't give you what you want. They're blocking everything that you're
Yes.
asking,
yeah.
you know. But that's also a skill or a resource that you need as a business person, and how to identify what stories from yourself or from your business would interest media professionals or would
Mm,
interest someone looking covering that industry. How to highlight those stories and how to place them in a way that journalists can easily identify or relate to. So the communication people are like the in-between and know how to spread your message such
mm,
that it
Yes.
reaches the people who, the journalists who and can help their work or can help our work. So I don't know. Of course, not a lot of businesses, startups can afford good PR or good communication. But the sooner you're able to afford that, I think it's something that you invest in.
awesome.
Yes,
Awesome.
absolutely.
Thank you.
I agree.
Because they make our lives
Thank
easy.
yes, make your lives easier. Thank you so much for being our guest, Wilfred Okiche. My final question is, what do you hope that our listeners will take away from this conversation that we've had today?
Hmm, everything.
Everything. It was great,
Everything.
right? Right. We touched on, how you got started, career. So people, listening to this episode can learn about, that maybe how you start out in your education is not how you finish, and it's
Yeah.
okay. And also how maybe you can, intersect two different passions or two different things. So, there are a lot of up and coming journalists who are probably in those same spaces where, parents may want them to do one thing, they may want to do something else, and that's any industry, any kind of industry. So that was great to talk about that. I really enjoyed talking about the work that you do. Thank you so much for just being kind of open and honest and accessible to me, to greatness coach,
Thank you.
to
Thank
our
you.
audience, to everyone who want to know more. We want to be helpful to the media. We also want to get our stories told, but we want to do so in a way that we are contributing, kind of to the greater good of the world. So thank you so much for giving us an insight into what that's like, because there's so many people who have a purpose and, have a story, and they're trying to live out that purpose or get that story told to help people. But we just don't know how to do that on a mass scale. And people like, you and I, like the three of us, that is our thing. That's why we do what we do. I don't think some people just like wake up and decide, that they're just going to help other people because it seems fun. I feel like you have a passion for it, and that we all do, and that, working together, entrepreneurs, publicists, the media, that we can work together and, and kind of get these great stories and messages out and help each other forward, our purposes. So thank you so much for being a guest. We really appreciate it. And if you don't have anything else you would like to close with, then that will be the conclusion of this episode.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.